If they shoot you, in order your family to get your body, you have to pay for the bullets, which is an exuberant amount of money to get the body of the person they just executed. And I was actually picked up in the middle of the street and thrown into the Iranian army. So the way I got out of country was through the Turkish border. And so getting in the middle of the sheep and crossing the border, basically. Didn't know anybody, had $50 in my pocket, and landed in Detroit and sat on the bench at the airport figuring out, okay, now what? What am I going to do? My image of America was, I'm going to go to Detroit, I'm going to join a gang, and I'm going to break dance in the streets. And I rented a bed over there, put my suitcase, locked it up, and went walking the streets to find a job. You want 3 meals a day, a good paycheck, medical benefits. You want to think about signing up for the army. And they opened the door, and this was August 1st. Iraq invaded Kuwait on August 2nd.
Oh, wow.
And we opened the door, and this rush of hot air hit me.
So we're here with author and veteran, man of many talents, Nick Berg. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. And we're here to talk about your book, Shadows of Tehran, as well as anything else that comes up during the podcast, because as Jen was saying before we started the official chat here, is she's been looking forward to talking to you. And again, as someone who served yourself for about 11 years in the Army, Jen's a former Navy pilot. I'm still in. Just super excited to talk with someone else who's writing about a little bit about your life and kind of some of the history behind that. So can you tell us and our listeners and our watchers first a little bit about the book, and then we'll just jump off the springboard from there?
Sure, absolutely. So the book is actually based on my life, and it's been about 2 years since I started writing this book. And what started the book was all my friends keep saying, oh, you got such a great story, you got to write this down. And so finally I decided, okay, I'm going to write it down. And English is my third language. So I was really trying hard to make sure I understand how to write it for English reading audience. So I had a book coach to help me write the book. He's a 10 times London Times bestseller.
Oh, cool.
And he helped me write this book throughout the whole process. But I learned so much writing the book.
So you grew up in Iran, you escaped when you were 19, came over to America and joined the Army not too long after that. But aside from your experience, right, the first 19 years or so of your life there in Iran, what kind of research did you do for the book? Were you just reaching out to friends and family, getting their experiences over the period that you covered? Because I think you covered from the 70s through the 80s. And was it past that through the book?
Yeah, it was about early 2000.
Early 2000. So did you do any further research, or was it really mostly your experience and then people you knew?
I did a lot of research, actually, to make sure that the events, because memory fails you a lot of times, and you see things from a perspective that you understand at the moment and at the time, but it might not be accurate historically.
Absolutely.
So I had to do a lot of research to make sure that historically is accurate, because I'm writing it as a historical fiction.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do is to give a person perspective of how people felt during these events. But the events themselves had to be authentic and had to be accurate in the process.
So that's really neat because...
Yeah, so I understand. So you used a character.
Yeah.
You basically built a character based on yourself, but it wasn't you, but... No. That's how you wrote this, which I really appreciate, because that way, you're right, you have to research then, because just because you lived it, Scott and I lived Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, doesn't mean I remember all of the specifics going on, the politics in the background, right? I'm so focused in on what I'm doing right then and where I'm at. I'm not thinking about all of the other factors that are happening around the world. And so those things are important if you're writing historical fiction. So I can definitely understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people ask me a lot of times, why did you write this as a memoir? Why are you writing it as a fiction more than that? And I think based on everything that I've been in my life, I didn't want to justify anything. I
Okay.
didn't want it to be me. And I wanted to be a character, and I wanted to be a person separate from me. So going through the whole book, writing the writing process was all about not me. I'm talking about Ricardo, and I'm talking about his life in the process.
Was there anything like during your research? And I always find this interesting when we get to talk to authors. Was there anything during your research that you learned or discovered that either surprised you or you hadn't really known before, that kind of changed the way you saw some of that period of history that you actually lived through, but maybe not had known at the time?
Yeah, there were some detailed things that I wasn't aware of that during the research process I learned at a bigger context. It was no surprises. Oh my God, it didn't happen the way I think it happened.
Yeah.
But it was like understanding that, just like Jen was saying, is that you're so focused around your piece of the pie on this that you miss the bigger picture sometimes. Yeah.
So when we talk about your personal history and what you're using for the historical fiction, is you're living through the Iranian Revolution, that it kicks off in like the 77, but ends in 79, and you're living through this, and you have a duality of background because your mother is Iranian and your father is American, and that's true for your character as well.
Yes.
Now, I know in your real life, your father leaves when you're 7. Is that true for your character as well?
Yes.
Now, what is that like in that culture for a father to leave and to be raised by a mother? Is that accepted in the Iranian culture, or did you
Not really?
Yeah,
not really.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So my mom being a single mother was very difficult on her, and I tried to portray that in the book. How difficult it was that every time she talked to anybody, any guy in the market or somewhere, they would look at her. The women would come and hold their husbands away like she was trying to steal them.
Oh, wow.
And the culture itself, even though that it's a modern culture, there's still a lot of those stigmas and stuff around single women, especially at that time. And then after the revolution happened and they took away a lot of the women's rights and those types of things, it became a lot worse.
Yeah.
Now she was a single woman living in a house by herself under Islamic government. And it was a very, very difficult time. And I try to portray that in the book. As you read the book, is that there was a reviewer that made a comment that sometimes survival and love are two different things. And you do things for survival to get through things. And I think the whole stepfather coming into the picture and all of that, it was based more of a survival thing for her than it was a love thing that she wanted to live with this person and all of that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting kind of observation, especially by a book reviewer.
Well, 100%. And that was my experience in the Middle East too. So I remember I couldn't really shop in the souks. I had to have a male with me because no one's really going to, like you said, even make eye contact with me. Or so to negotiate, you really need a male with you. And I don't think people really understand that unless they've lived it or seen it or what that's, especially from an American westernized culture. You just don't understand that concept. Now, your mother remarried. Is she still in Iran today, or did she come to America?
She's still there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And
she's still there.
And do you go back and visit her?
No, I can't go back.
Yeah, wow. I think I saw one of your more recent interviews that said you're a little bit of a rabble rouser, and that's part of the reason why you escaped the country.
Yeah, my execution note was out before, so I had to escape Iran, actually.
Oh my goodness.
So explain that to me. I saw execution order. You're 19 years old. What does that look like? What is that? When that comes out, is it you and a bunch of people or just you? What
like, was your face on a wanted poster or something like that? Or?
Yeah, kind of like that. But in Iran during that period of time, in 1 year, they killed over 15,000 people, opposition people. They hold executions in the middle of the street. They bring a tractor trailer with a noose on it, and they hang the people there. If they shoot you, in order your family to get your body, you have to pay for the bullets, which is an exuberant amount of money to get the body of the person they just executed.
Wow.
It's
Man.
at that time, there's no law, basically. They would just break down the doors, come into your house whenever they please, take you away, and sometimes nobody would hear from you. Currently in Iran, there's mass graves it's miles and miles of mass graves that the bodies are buried there with no headstones, with nothing like that. And people have been trying to talk about it, but they can't.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So the execution order comes out with your name on it. And basically, it's either you got to get out of the country or someone's going to turn you in or someone's going to show up at your door and you don't know when and you don't know who.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, how do you get out of the country then?
So the way I got out of the country was through the Turkish border between Iran and that area is where the Kurdish people live. In Turkey, Iran, and northern Iraq, that's where all of the Kurdish Bedouins have, and they have sheep.
Okay.
Have thousands of sheep. And so getting in the middle of the sheep and crossing the border, basically.
Wow.
Okay.
Now for I think the next part of the book was obviously the Iran-Iraq conflict that took place from 80 to 88. Because you weren't there, obviously your perspective was as someone who had just left the country.
No, I was there during the Iranian Iraq War.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, he was in the army.
Okay, so you actually, when you came in the army, like you got sent over.
Yeah, actually, when I joined, which Iran and Iraq war, if you're talking about Iran and Iraq or U.S. and Iraq?
Iran and Iraq, the 80s.
Iran and
the
Iraq.
80s.
Yeah, the Iran and Iraq war, I was in Iran when it started.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And I was actually picked up in the middle of the street and thrown into the Iranian army for about 6 months, fighting with the Iraqis. And I have some scars from it too, because
Holy cow.
And it was basically, it took me 6 months to prove that, because if you were a student, you were exempt. So it took me 6 months to prove, first, I'm not Iranian. Second, I'm a student.
Yeah.
It took about 6 months to do that. I had lost couple of my really good friends, one to chemical attack in Halabja in Iraq. I had to carry his body back from the front lines to bury him.
Jeez.
There were rockets coming down on us pretty much every night, watching the fireworks. We would come out into the streets and watch the airplanes bomb, and we would count the bombs because we knew how many bombs each plane could carry.
Yeah.
And then we would know when the number of bombs hit a certain amount, then we would say, okay, it's time to come back out.
Wow. And you wrote your character, again, your experiences all through that.
All through that, yes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So then your execution order doesn't come until the 80s then, if you're still in Iran.
It's until 1987.
1987. Okay. So when you come to America, how old are you?
I'm 19.
You're 19 and you come alone, no mom.
No mom, no family, didn't know anybody, had $50 in my pocket and landed in Detroit and sat on a bench at the airport figuring out, okay, now what? What am I going to do now?
Oh my gosh. And can you speak any English at that time or very little?
Very, very little, very broken English. And it was a culture shock. And this is the funny part, because my image of America, before that, we came to America one time before the revolution in Iran and stuff to look for my dad, and we couldn't find him. By the way, I found out my dad works for the CIA the whole time.
I saw that.
I found
them
35 years later in Las Vegas.
That's crazy.
Which is another story on its own. But my image of America was from movies and the things that we saw in Iran. So at the time, breakdancing was really big, and Michael Jackson was the big thing all of that. So my image of America was, I'm going to go to Detroit, I'm going to join a gang, and I'm going to break dance in the streets.
I love that.
That's amazing. I love that.
So 87, you're sitting on a bench in Detroit, and you're like, what am I going to do now? So what did you do? What does your character do? What do you do next?
So there was a taxi driver. He was sitting on the bench over there because it was summer day. It was in August, and it was a summer day. It was hot. He was sitting there on the bench with me as well. And I had my one little suitcase and just sitting there, just looking around thinking, okay, now what am I going to do? And had a conversation with the guy with my broken English. And he said, where are you going? I have no idea. He said, you want to go to a hotel? I'm like, I pulled out my money and said, this is what I got. He said, that's not going to get you far.
Oh my gosh.
So he took me to a YMCA downtown Detroit,
Yeah.
which you could rent a bed basically for $10 a night. And I rented a bed over there, put my suitcase, locked it up, and went walking the streets to find a job because I thought that's what you do. So
Yeah.
I walked into a Wendy's and there was this beautiful lady that was the manager, and I asked her for a job, and she gave me an application. She said, and I'm looking at this application, I have no idea what to write in this application. So with my broken English, we communicated, and she said, "So do you have a social security card?" I'm like, "What is that?"
Oh, yeah, of course.
I had no idea you needed a social security card.
Yep.
She helped me through this whole process
Wow.
of getting the job and all of that stuff. And my idea at the time was, so I was flipping burgers in the back because my English wasn't very good. So I'm like, okay, this is my career. My dream was to make it to the cash register, to be the guy.
Yeah.
It's very much like Coming to
Wow.
America.
Yeah.
Next week I'll be on fries, and then the big bucks start rolling
McDowell's,
in.
not McDonald's.
Yeah, McDowell's.
Yeah.
So that was my idea of career progression. But there was this strip mall across the street and the Army recruiting station in that strip mall. And they would come and eat lunch at the Wendy's once in a while. And this gentleman, he would, we started talking and having conversations and stuff. And he said, "Hey, I know you're here and all of this stuff. You want 3 meals a day, a good paycheck, medical benefits. You want to think about signing up for the Army?" I'm like, "Sign me up. This is great. Let's do it." When I took the answer test,
That's amazing.
which I completely bombed it, by the way. The
Yeah.
math and the physics and things like that was good. English, not very good.
Wow.
So the only thing I qualified for was infantry.
That's wild. That is quite the story. Now, I
Right.
think you said too, or at least some of your interviews, and I collected some stuff together. You said the Army really taught you the life skills and gave you that structure, gave you that foundation to make your life here in America. Was that the same for your character through the book?
It's the same thing for the character through the book.
Yeah.
I mean, Army taught me what America is about, and it gave me a family that I didn't have. And it was unreal for me going through basic training and all of that stuff, because I went through basic training for 3 weeks when I was in Iran.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
At first, I was really afraid when the sergeants would yell at you and scream at you. After the first few days, I figured out, man, they can't beat you up. I'm like, this is a
Oh my gosh.
They can't hit me.
So the difference between American basic and Iranian basic is the physicality of what the instructor can do to you. So in
Right.
Iran, they really could hit you and beat you.
They hit you, they slap you, they throw you around.
Oh, wow.
But in American Army, I figured out all they can do is make me do push-ups.
Yeah.
I'm like, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
Do that all little.
Well,
Your perspective was so like, hey, I got
and
this.
I got it.
and I think too, all of us who've gone through, if anybody's listening or watching, anybody who's gone through boot camp has that moment when they realize, okay, I can do this.
I can play
right?
this game.
I can play this game. It was the same for
Yeah.
me, and I had nowhere near the experience, doing my Navy version of boot camp when I went through college. But after the first few days, after you get used to getting yelled at, the same thing. All it can make me do is just do more push-ups. And so it's that you have that realization, especially for you, you had already been through a much different experience.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. So how long before you joined the Army were you in America? Was it about a year?
About 6 months.
6 months.
Okay.
So I love that you found the Army, and I love that you found, and happy 250th birthday to the Army, by the way.
Yeah, happy birthday to the Army.
I love that you found that, because that is what the military does. I really do believe that it gives you that family. It gives you that sense of community. It builds up you as a person. It teaches you those life skills. And then it also offers you ways to develop yourself with education and training. And I love that's what you found, and you were able to do that. I feel like it's almost like a blessing that happened to you.
It was a great blessing. I owe everything to the Army. I mean, my whole life after coming to the U.S., I owe it to the Army. And I was so disappointed when I had to leave the army. And the reason was because I got injured in Bosnia.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be on the teams anymore. And I couldn't do the jump out of airplanes and all of that stuff. So it was a real disappointment for me that I couldn't finish the whole 20 years.
Well, I love that the Army also recognized your potential as half Iranian, that they could use you in the Middle East, right? And so I'm glad that they were able to recognize that as well, and you were able to do that. What was it like going back in that capacity? What did that feel like?
The interesting part was, and I never forget that day, when the C-141 landed, that we spent 17 hours on the back of C-141 from Pope Air Force Base into Tehran Airport when the first Gulf War happened. And I got off that plane because they told us we were going to Turkey. And they opened the door, and this was August 1st. Iraq invaded Kuwait on August 2nd.
Oh, wow.
And we opened the door, and this rush of hot air hit me. And as soon as it hit me, a friend of mine that was sitting with me, he's, "Oh, we're in Turkey." I'm like, "No, we're not."
You knew.
I knew.
You knew.
I could not forget that desert heat.
Wow.
And so when we get off the plane and get ready, they finally tell us we're in Saudi Arabia, and they were expecting Iraq to invade Kuwait. And they pulled us to the edge of Saudi, Iraq, Kuwait corner of the area. And I never forget, we were sitting there with a bunch of Stinger missiles and a bunch of our weapons and stuff. And General Luck at the time was the 18th Airborne Corps commander. He was in charge. And he came up to me and he said, "Son, see that highway?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He said, "If the Iraqis decide to come into Saudi Arabia, they're going to come through here. And there's 2 tank battalions sitting at the other end of this highway. What do you think we're going to do?" I said, "Well, sir, we're just going to fight with them." He said, "We don't have enough ammo or people here to fight the tank battalion." I said, "Well, then we just throw rocks at them, sir." He said, "That's the spirit. That's what I'm looking for."
That's what a general's looking for. It's just some fight. I just need some fight, my soldiers. We'll figure it out.
So that's amazing. How did you feel going back to fight? How did that make you feel? And I know that this is personal. This is not who your character is.
Right.
When you write a character who's having this duality, and I think that is the biggest thing here. It's survival, it's duality, you're straddling 2 worlds here. You're American and Iranian. And what's hard about that is you don't really get accepted by either.
Right.
But your heart belongs to both.
Yeah. And the feeling was, okay, I spent all of this time running out of Iran, going through Europe, getting to America, joining the army. Now here I'm back in the same desert, fighting the same guys from a different angle.
Yeah.
Wow. But even if Iran would have gotten involved into that war, there's a big difference with fighting your people and fighting a government.
Yes.
Yeah.
And throughout this whole last few days, where all of the attacks on Iran from Israel and all of this happened, everybody keep asking me, "So what do you think?" I'm like, Israel is not fighting the Iranian people.
Yeah.
They're fighting the Islamic government. And I was fighting against that Islamic government before I left Iran. And that's why my execution note was out. And there's a big separation of difference between the government and the military in Iran as well. So when you hear about the IRGC in Iran, which is the kind of like the Iraqi Republican Guards and all of that, they're the defenders of the government, not the defenders of Iran.
Yeah.
All of the heads that Israel took out, they're all IRGC commanders. These are the same people that in 2019 and 2022 suppressed all of the uprising of women life freedom in Iran. They're the same ones that executed a lot of my friends. So I don't see them as representative of Iran. I see them as the Islamic government.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective, because that very easily gets lost when you're just watching the news and you see the highlights of, hey, bombed nuclear facility sites, and it's just the country in general. But I appreciate that perspective, and that's something that I want our listeners and our viewers to really listen and to think about. It's, to your point, it's the government of those that aren't really protecting the people. And I think in some other spots you said it's anywhere from 80 to 90% of the people are actually pro-Western.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they've just been suppressed. And I love that because it's real world experience from you. This clash of East versus West, why do you think people don't want to hear the truth? Like, why do you think people think Iran is all of this and it's not these people who are being oppressed? And when you think about women's rights in Iran, like, I'm telling you, what rights, right? Like, I'm always like talking about the way women are treated there. I was over there 20 years ago. Right. And I made a point to always wear my hair down so that you could see that I was a woman. And what I learned through my military experience is I actually gave hope to those Iranian women that there is the westernized culture does support women's rights and do actually see women as being more than just being suppressed. And I wanted to do that to give them hope. And I don't know why here in America, it's hard for people to see that or understand that. What do you think that is?
So this is a symptom of the Western culture because the governments are representatives of the people.
Yeah.
When your government is a representative of people, your military is a representative of your people. So the government and the people, even though you might be on the left, you might be on the right, you might not disagree on a lot of the topics and the decisions and all of that. But the government is the people and the people is the government.
Yeah.
So when you grow up in that type of a society, you don't understand when a dictator runs things on their own. You think the people are supporting them. That's why they're in power.
That's a great point.
A lot of people ask me, so why doesn't people in Iran just overthrow the government? They think it's just like but it's not. Not that simple. It's a very different way of looking at things and the way different. So in America, in Europe, in most of these countries, they feel that the government is theirs.
Yeah.
But in Iran, the government is a separate entity.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something, again, I think that we try to talk about through history, right? When we talk about our history topics, we try to be cognizant of the lens that we are looking at something through. Whether it's our modern day morals and values and what we know of, whether it's like a slavery topic or the American Revolution or whatever it is, we try to be cognizant of our modern day lens that we're looking at it through. But to your point, this is the American Western lens that we're looking at other countries through. So I think that's a really good point. And for folks who are history fans and listeners and an audience of ours, I would hope that they make that connection, because I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, and I'm going to bring this topic up because I feel very passionate about it, is that when people talk about the Israeli and Gaza war, and there's a lot of people that say, oh my God, those poor people are dying over there and Israel is bombing them and doing this and doing that. My argument to that is, did you feel the same way when we bombed Berlin? To destroy the Nazis?
Yep.
There were a lot of innocent people there. There were a lot of women and children that died. And those were the people that, maybe not all of them, but majority of them elected Hitler.
Yeah.
So the thing is, in every war, unfortunately, there is casualties and there is civilian casualties and there is innocent people that are going to die. But that doesn't change the fact that we have to fight a just war.
Yeah.
I know. And people love to use World War II and Nazism as their example for everything, but they never forget the other side of it. Like, I always remind people, we didn't come into the war for a long time, right? And we just kind of watched things happen for a long time, America, right? We like to tote ourselves as the heroes, but like for a long time, we just let that happen. So imagine if we had the opportunity to bomb areas before they opened the concentration camps, before they did that. Imagine we had that opportunity. What would that have looked like for America? And people don't like to think about that with the modernization of everything. But I really loved your analogy where you talked about your character and your book with the mirror and the window, right? So looking at themselves themselves, their life, who they are, and the window, the opportunity. Can you explain that analogy for me, our listeners? Because I thought that was just insightful about your character and what they're going through in their personal background and what they're doing in the world with this conflict that's going on.
Yeah, the message of the book is it's really about hope. It's about no matter what you're going through, it's not a basis of comparison. Oh my God, this guy saw a lot of dead bodies. I've never been in that situation. And so my life is not as bad. That's not the point. The point is that no matter what life throws you, you can't control the external things that happen to you, but you can make the decision to be a victim or a survivor. And it's a personal decision. And what changes your life is those series of decisions that you make throughout your life. So what I was trying to do with that mirror is look at yourself and look at the decisions that you have made and use that window to see what decisions other people have made and what changed their lives and what you can change in your own life in order to be a better person.
Yeah. I love that because history, I'm a big fan of history doesn't repeat itself, but it echoes. And if you can learn from history, if you can look through that window of history and see what people did in the past and how they acted, it can give you a good reflection in the mirror of how maybe you can use that knowledge and act and move forward. And I really loved that.
During my time when I was in Iran and I'm working against the government, the French partisans were my heroes.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of reading around World War II and really understanding their tactics, what they did and how they did it and all of that stuff. They were my heroes. And so looking at that window is how they adapted to live under Nazis and how that reflected in my life living under the Islamic government.
Now, that's cool that you... And that's what I like about asking and seeing how people research their books and stuff like that. Because Jen's working on her own historical fiction. And I love hearing about how people research because different eras of history have different resources, right?
Right.
If you're writing a book about a president, sometimes a president kept all sorts of journals and you can get primary source. Or for you, right, you lived through large parts of it, but you're also studying World War II and some of the experiences there, because I think you quoted a couple times Winston Churchill, or at least attributed him, when you're going through hell, keep going. And it seems like kind of like a core tenet of you and your character of going through these highs and lows of life and through these conflicts. And so it's always interesting to me seeing, and again, for our audience, realizing that when you're researching a topic or you're researching for a book, it doesn't have to be just on that area, but you can see war is different, but it's also the same throughout the years. And so the experiences and what different societies and cultures and areas of the world go through, while they are very different in every conflict, people are still people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I had a question for you you talk a lot about indoctrination and lies, and you have the people, are swayed by politics, and you say sometimes uneducated. In today's day and age, we even see educated people who are swayed by indoctrination and lies. And it happens in every country. So what have you found is the best way to kind of is it just getting the stories out there, getting people to just listen instead of talk? Is it getting people to just do their own research? What do you think is the best way to overcome that indoctrination and lies?
Thing is that when I talk about uneducated, I'm not talking about school education.
Yeah.
There's a big difference. You could have a PhD and still be in it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
So it's not about school education. It's about life education. It's about looking at the past, looking at the history. I'm a huge history buff. So it's really understanding what happened. What are the things that happened in the past? Everything from when we look at World War I and the causes of the World War I, why it started.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to talk about World War II, but World War I was actually the starter of World War II.
Yep.
So when you look at World War I and what happened there and how Hitler came into power and influenced big populations based on what happened in World War One and how use that to basically create the Jews as the enemy of Germany and all of that. So there's a lot of lessons in there from the propaganda perspective, from understanding how he was able to change minds of people to do all of those things. And then when it comes to religion, it's becomes a completely different picture. And as Nietzsche once said, good people will always do good and bad people will always do bad. But for a good person to do bad, it takes religion.
Interesting. Yep.
That is really interesting to understand your own belief system and what your own compass in your life is and how you look at things. And yeah, especially today with social media and all of these things, there's a lot of influences on you, but do your own research.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things we always try to just mention, right? We've done, I don't know how many podcasts now, 150 plus, 160. And when we're talking about fellow authors or the topics, we're always trying to talk about, hey, these are great places to start. If it's primary source, that's ideal. But if you're reading another author, you got to make sure you do your own homework, right? We talked about Stephen Ambrose not too long ago, and he did some amazing things for history and for World War II and the World War II Museum, but he had his own weaknesses as well. Right. And we always say that doesn't mean that it's not good information. It just means that you need to make sure that you have the critical thinking skills enough, right? The life experience enough to know, hey, if I have a question about this thing, I shouldn't just always take it in blind faith as the truth. I should do my own homework. I should do my own research.
Yeah, so I grew up in my uncle's bookstore, and it's in the book. My uncle had this really small bookstore that he repaired old antique books and things like that. So he was kind of like my father for most of my time in Iran that I grew up with. And he was a real critical thinker in this process. And I learned so much from him and inside of that bookstore and all of that. And he always told me, he said, when you read in the book, keep in mind that that's the perspective of the writer.
Yeah. And
remember that the history is always written by the victors. And so there's always another side to it. So
that's a
keep
great
that
lesson
in mind
when
as you're reading these things.
Yep. Absolutely. That's a phenomenal lesson to have built into you at a young age, because it's too easy now, especially with the internet and stuff like that. You Google something and you assume that the top couple hits are true. That's not the case. Not always.
Yeah. Now, your character in the book, you want to write more, right? So where does the story end for your character? What time is the story ending, and what would be the next follow-on to it?
So the next book is going to be finishing Ricardo's story, basically. And that would be probably somewhere around 2018, 2019. That's where I'm going to finish his story. Yeah. The third book is going to be about my dad.
Okay.
And, because he passed away 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I spent 3 weeks before he passed away with him. I recorded all of his stories.
Wow.
To write it as the third book.
Oh, cool.
And he was a naval intelligence officer. He was a Navy.
Okay. All right. Fellow Army Navy family. Now, in our research, I saw that you've talked about him, right? He had worked for, was it CIA or was it Navy intelligence? Yeah, CIA. He worked for the CIA. Sounds like his story would be quite interesting. So can you touch a little bit on him and maybe what you'll write in that book?
Yeah, his story, he was in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and his ship docked in Iran at the time in the 60s. Okay. And that's where he met my mom, and he was supposed to be in Iran, and he was leaving the Navy and coming to Iran. And after I found them 35 years later in Las Vegas, I asked them, I said, because then I found out that I have a whole bunch of half-sisters and brothers in Egypt, in Lebanon, in a couple other places as well. And I asked them, I said, so why do you have so many women and families and all of that? And his answer was, having a family is the best cover.
Oh my gosh.
When I read that about you, and I talking to Scott, CIA, I'm like, his dad sounds like the typical James Bond from the from the work we have done with people like your dad, that is the best cover. And I wasn't surprised to hear that he had other families, because that was even my experience working with those people that do that.
Yeah, but one thing I say about my dad, he wasn't an emotional person. He wasn't in my life for a very long time. But he did work with the U.S. Army and directed a lot of the things that I did in the U.S. Army. He knew exactly where I was, what I was doing.
Wow.
And he had complete insight into everything from the time I left Iran.
Wow.
And I didn't know he was there.
Wow. That's got to be, I mean, what did that feel like when you found out that he had that insight, oversight on your life? Was that kind of a relief? Was that, like, I imagine you must have had some mixed feelings about that.
I, working with special operations in the Army, I understood him.
Ah, okay, of course. Yeah, you had a little bit of insight already, so you could categorize that.
My sister is completely the opposite of me. She's, oh my God, he's an idiot. He's this, he's that. He didn't take care of us. All of that. But I completely understood him. I only completely understood his mentality. For him, it was country and his job.
Yeah.
That's all he cared about in his life. Everything else was a vehicle to get the job done.
Wow.
It sounds like quintessential James Bond, right? That unforgiving love of country, right? Like it do just whatever it takes for that love of country. And I'll be honest with you, between our listeners and you, we need people like that. And so I'm thankful for people like your father.
Yes, we do. We need people like that.
Okay.
Right on.
That's good.
So if people want to find your book, if they want to find more about you and keep track of you and look for your future books, because I think that, I mean, I'm going to probably order your book because I just think it sounds so fascinating. I'm enjoying this conversation, and I think the future books will be just as interesting. Where's the best place for folks to find you and kind of keep track of what you're doing?
So my website, pnberg.com.
Okay.
And that's and by the way, I go by Nick because it was easier. My first name is Pedro. That's why I named the character Ricardo.
Gotcha.
And with the last name, which is Berg, which sounds Jewish.
Yeah.
And in Iran, and you saw in all those comments and everything else, they're talking about that he might be Jewish. I'm not Jewish.
Yep.
My mom was Zoroastrian, actually. She was a Muslim.
Yeah.
I grew up as a Zoroastrian.
Okay.
And everybody called me the Spanish Jewish person with the Iranian background that never fit anywhere. So the book, they can find it on my website, pnberg.com.
Okay.
The book's available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of the local bookstores, they can find it there.
We really appreciate you joining us today and telling us about your life and your book and all the stuff that's around that, because it is chock full of not only history, but I mean, you're the primary source in this for a lot of this stuff, which is fun for us as history nerds. Well, history nerd and aspiring married to a history nerd right here, as I joke all the time. But it's fun to be able to learn about the research you did, but also that you were part of the primary source, which is pretty unique for us.
Yeah. And the book is the book is called Shadows of Tehran. And I want people to understand we're living in the shadows of Tehran now.
Yeah.
Now.
So if you want to read something,
learn something
that is based in real history of what is happening in the world today, this would be a great book for you to start. So we thank you for joining us today. It was a great conversation. We're praying for your mom and your family over there. We hope
she's fine right now. I talked to her yesterday. She's fine. Yeah. And the biggest thing is coming to America and living here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate everything that this country has done for me. And there's no greater place to live. And so I was talking to somebody, I said, if America changes and goes away the way it is today, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, look at that. You got this one. I got this one emotional. Well, thanks again and again for our watchers and our listeners. I'll have all the information for Nick's book down in the show notes and the video description. I'll flash some stuff up on the screen as well. But thank you again, Nick, for joining us. And for our audience, we'll talk to you guys next time. right. So what'd you guys think of our interview with Nick? There was more surprises to me even after I'd done my research and looked at his other podcasts and interviews he's been on. We even found out he was a little starstruck talking to us because he's been following us for a couple years. But what'd you guys think of that? Jen, what'd you think of the interview?
I felt like it was so validating about where America is today, about our love of country, our love of serving in the greatest military in the world. But he really put a lot of perspective as someone who grew up through it all and what's happening today, what he's seeing today. I loved his perspective, his point of view, historical fiction, writing about what's going on today from a real life perspective of someone who lived it.
Yeah, and it sounds like he's got a couple more books coming out that are even more interesting, like the story about his father having worked for the Navy and the intelligence world and then the CIA, and then he found out he's got a bunch of half brothers and sisters all spread throughout the globe. It was just a fascinating interview. Nick was such a positive person, and I just so enjoyed talking to him as a fellow veteran, someone who had served in the Army for 11 years and would have done more if he could have. And now he's getting this story out there. It's fun to talk to someone who is a primary source, right? That is incredibly rare for us. I don't know if we could ever really say that. In the fact that he not only researched what happened there in the Middle East, but other wars to help fill out some of the experiences of the characters in his story, which I just thought was a really interesting piece of how authors do what they do.
Yeah, and as historians, we know you love this podcast and this show because of history. If you want to learn more about what's happening in the world today, this would be a great book.
Yeah.
This would be a great way to start. Just get your feet wet in someone who's lived through this Iranian Revolution, then through the Iranian-Iraq War, then coming to America and going back. It really is a great foundation to where America is today and all of these different conflicts that are going on. It gives you a great understanding of this from our generation. So yeah, I really think this was a wonderful interview for us to do. And we don't really do a lot of like current events, but I feel like this is very important and the history of it is important for everyone to learn.
Yeah, so if you want a book with a good story that's well researched, that's accurate because he took his time making sure it was accurate and not just biased from his view from going through it, that will help explain what's going on in the world today and give you some knowledge and foundation in that, check out Shadows of Tehran. Links are in the video description or podcast show notes below. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and our interview with Nick, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
This has been a Walk with History production. Talk with History is created and hosted by me, Scott Benny. Episode researched by Jennifer Benny. Check out the show notes for links and references mentioned in this episode. Talk with History is supported by our fans at thehistoryroadtrip.com.
Our eternal thanks go out to those providing funding to help keep us going. Thank you to Doug McCliverty, Larry Myers, Patrick Benny, Gail Cooper, Christy Coates, and Calvin Gifford. Make sure you hit that follow button in that podcast player, and we'll talk to you next time.